Hi everyone, welcome to another quick video. In this video I just wanted to show people, other nature photographers, bird photographers, how I'm using Topaz Denoise AI. I came across this software through a friend back probably in October. It was when I was in Australia. And I'm normally not a huge fan of like plugins for Photoshop and filters. I just haven't found that they're that useful or that beneficial, especially given the price tag of some of them. But this one is a huge exception. There are things that Topaz Denoise can do as far as removing noise and enhancing the image that you simply cannot do on your own in Photoshop. There's just no way to make such precise selections as the artificial intelligence does in this filter. It blew me away when I saw what it could do, and I've incorporated it into my normal workflow. So if you follow my kind of Photoshop tutelage, you know that I'm a big fan of using actions and having a general workflow action that works you through all your basic steps. Well, there's no reason why you can't incorporate Topaz Denoise into that. So that's what I'm going to show you today. The first thing we need to do, though, is to check our settings in Topaz. So you open up Topaz Denoise AI, that's where I am here, and if you go into your preferences and then go to advanced preferences, you can see here that there is something called Enable Discrete GPU. And what that means is if you actually have a graphics card, like a good graphics card in your computer, will dramatically speed up the operation of this filter. If you're using a laptop, you probably don't have that option. But in my case, I'm using my desktop computer, so I have said yes, enable discrete GPU, and I've said go ahead and use as much as you want, basically. When I did a test between the onboard graphics chip and my graphics card, it was twice as fast. So something that took 40 seconds took 20 seconds. And just so you know, Topaz recommends a graphics card with at least 4 gigabytes of memory. And optimally, they say one that has 8 gigabytes. Now that's getting into a pretty expensive graphic card. The one that I have has 3 gigabytes, so actually less than they recommend, and it works just fine. And you can run it without even that, but if you want a little faster, there's a quick tip. So I'm going to close out of Topaz Denoise AI now, and I'm just in regular Photoshop. And I'm just going to open up any old photo. It does not really matter what photo we look at here. Let's just open up, this guy. So this is a crescent-faced antpitta from a recent trip to Colombia. And what I want to show you here really quickly is over in my Actions tab here, I've got my normal workflow 16-bit, and I'm going to walk you through the steps, and then I'll actually play the action. So it used to be that I would start by doing, basically I would start down here. I would start with a levels adjustment layer, and then I would allow myself to layer mask if I needed, flatten it down, shadows and highlights, hue and saturation, brightness and contrast. Then I would select the background and use Photoshop to use the denoise filter in Photoshop. That worked fine. It does work fine. You can totally do that. But like I said, Topaz brings some really new capabilities to things. So for example, in this particular image, it doesn't have a crazy amount of noise, but it certainly does have noise. And if you went in there and tried to make a selection of, for example, those types of feathers, those really frilly, or like those ones, these ones on his crown, you simply cannot make a very good selection there. You have to either do a very loose selection, or you wind up with this sort of like very obvious distinction of where noise has been reduced and where noise has not been reduced. And that's always been a challenge. I haven't been too concerned about it because really, unless you zoom right in there, you don't notice it. But Topaz does a much better job than you could ever do. I would say the same is true for all of this moss here. And the big thing is, even though the filter might take a little bit to run, is how much time are you wasting making that selection, refining it, trying to select all these little bits in between the moss here to try to reduce noise. It's just such a time drain making the selection. So even if the filter takes a little bit, it's still way faster than making that selection. So what I've done is, Topaz recommends doing the noise reduction as early as possible in the workflow. So what I've done is I have the action run as a new layer, and then I add a layer mask. The action adds a layer mask to that layer, and then it does a stop and says if I want, I can mask it at all and then recrop the image. The one tiny little, I'll call it a glitch that I've noticed with Topaz Denoise AI is sometimes, maybe for just a few pixels around the outside, the very outside of the frame, it has a little bit of like a blurred effect. So what I've been doing is kind of not cropping my image to the final crop in RAW, for example, just leaving it a little bit loose, then allowing Topaz to do its thing, and then just do a quick little recrop, even if it's just a few pixels. That eliminates that glitch, and then you move on with the regular action. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's take a look now at how it would work. So I've selected my action here. I'm going to hit play. It's going to immediately launch me out into Topaz's Denoise plugin. So here we go. And the image comes up. I have it set on the split view here. So if I was, for example, I guess it doesn't really matter, but let's go ahead and have a look here. And if I reset the preview here, oh, sorry, that was not what I should have done. Reset. I don't want it to auto update the preview. I'm going to just bump this up a little bit. And now if I say update, now it's generating the preview. So if you look here, it's maybe hard to tell in the video on YouTube here, but it's done an incredible job about selecting these little feathers here, and I see absolutely no perceivable noise out here. It's very clear that it's also done some noise reduction on the eye and the bill, but all the feather detail is there. In fact, the feather detail is enhanced because you can see it's doing some sharpening. Now sometimes I find that it does too much sharpening, and that's where if you notice that, you could back it off here, or as I've done in the action, because it's on a separate layer and I've added a layer mask, I can simply mask any excessive sharpening back out. So once you've done usually the auto is just fine, but if you want, you can bump it up or down or whatever. Hit save. It's going to go ahead and process it now, and you can see it takes a little bit here. It's doing its thing. By no means is it incredibly slow. If you have a graphics card of 8 gigabytes, like I mentioned, perhaps yours just chugs right along. This is basically a full resolution image too, so depending on the image, it seems to take more or less time. But anyways, it seems to be about done now. So there we go. So now you see here that in the action, it comes up with a stop that I've written into that says now mask as needed and recrop slightly. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that now. So I'll select the crop tool. I will add a crop. What you can do if you just want to take a few pixels off is hold down the Alt key and then just pinch it in a tiny little bit, and that'll pinch it in on all sides, but maintain your 2:3 aspect ratio. So I've done the crop. Now if I wanted to, if I zoomed in to 100% and I looked at this, and if I turn the layer on and off, so we certainly see the noise being blasted away, but if I felt like, in this case it's probably okay, but if I felt like maybe it's getting a bit too sharp on the crown of his head here, I could simply grab the brush tool, painting in black. I've got it at 40% opacity, which is actually probably pretty good. Make my brush size a little bigger, and just mask some of that sharpening effect back out. So now if I do it, it's not very pronounced, the sharpening effect, but I still get all the benefit. Look, for example, here, if you can. I'm zooming way in, so I don't know how this will be, but that's before. Look at all that noise in the eye, and that's after. Look at the detail around the eye. It's just incredible what this filter can do. So we'd be happy with that now, and we would then just continue with the action. Now the action is essentially just my normal workflow. So we'd hit play, it would flatten it down, it asks us if we want to do a new layer, levels, yes. I'm not going to go ahead and make the images perfect, I'm just going to show you how I would do it. So I would do that, it says layer mask as necessary, okay, I don't think I need to in this case. Shadows and highlights, sure. Hue and saturation, okay. Brightness and contrast, sure. And then it launches for me to save it. I would save it where I wanted to. I'll just go ahead and save this as whatever. And that's that. So you can see how quickly you can integrate Topaz into your normal workflow to get a great result. Gives you all the control over getting the absolute best out of the software package, and you still just tick along as normal in Photoshop. It's not making your workflow slower. I would definitely challenge anyone, even if the filter is a little bit slower than the Photoshop denoise filter, the fact that you do not have to make a selection is hugely advantageous. So that's how I'm using Topaz Denoise AI. I couldn't say enough good things about this filter package. They also have a sharpening one, which is also great. But in this video, I just wanted to show you how I'm using Topaz Denoise AI in my regular workflow to process my nature photography images. So I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more Photoshop updates, be sure to check out, I'll put a link, all of my Photoshop ebooks, especially the guide to post-processing and then the process with me guides, where I'll be digging more into this, this Topaz software as well as all of my other little tips and tricks. Thanks for watching, guys. See you again.